So I'm going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right, so diversity and inclusion. Why is that important? I'll tell you, 2022, if you're not on board, you will have some problems here with this subject. Conflict of interest, I have none. The objectives will be to provide a clear understanding of what diversity, inclusion, and culture for us, what it means in neurological terms, to raise also greater awareness and sensitivity to diversity issues that go well beyond the assumed categories. So this morning we got to discuss this helps you with your CME and probably all the courses you have to do in terms of how to become a better professional and how to serve better your community. Inclusion. Dimensions of the diversity is like a mosaic of differences and similarities, and they have dimensions that are very particular to some subgroups. But you can probably think about appearance, age, culture, ethnicity, and you have other characteristics like race, language, gender, sexual orientation is big. For our specialty on trying to understand this very well so you can better serve these patients that are nowadays going through transgender surgeries, and urology is really one of the forefronts and specialties that are pioneers in that kind of procedure. Religion really is very important nowadays. We see a lot of, at least in my neck of the woods, we see a lot of refugees with different types of religions and customs, and we gotta be trying to serve them without offending or making sure that they are included. And of course, there are other socioeconomic factors that you can also define this term diversity. If you see how you communicate, how people are communicating, and what does that mean in terms of us communicating with the patients and families and so on, and even with your colleagues. When you are talking to somebody, what I learned with all these different courses that I've been taking and trying to improve our section, the South Central section of the AUA in terms of diversity and inclusion, I learned that you bring a lot of, in the first even milliseconds of getting to know somebody and try to communicate, you have all the baggage that you bring with you, not only as a person, as your group that you probably belong to, but your age, just your age. You have more experience, and you can talk to younger generations about your experience, and you bring that cultural baggage and what you learn in your life, and that applies to each of these different factors and characteristics that will influence the way that you perceive somebody and somebody perceives you, and how the conversation can go depending on whatever the subject is. What is interesting is that there is a new concept, I think, for the American culture, the melting pot, or the I even heard a bowl of salad, because the salad has different colors and different products and different characteristics, smell and aroma, and it depends on the dressing. And I heard all those different terms, but it's interesting, and you have to be aware of, is that each individual subgroup, or in terms of food critics, each ingredient of a dish has to be respected and should be fully enjoyed. Like I don't know if you guys remember When Harry Met Sally. that very famous Delhi scene that she is clearly enjoying herself, or trying to, I think. Anyway, equity and equality, are those the same things? Actually not, and I learned a lot about this. It's incredible. Equity and is, if you go to the dictionary and try to learn what that means, is it's the fairness, is to be just, the justice in the way people are treated. That's equity. But equality is a state, quality or state of being equal, the quality or state of having the same right, social status, etc. And if you see this picture here, you see the tall guy, the average guy, and the little guy there. Well, what is, if you want to define what equity and equality is, fair versus equal, you will see that the little guy was invited to go and watch the game and, you know, cheer and be happy, but actually he cannot even see the game. So it's not fair. He was brought to the party, but really he was not included until this become fair and he's part of the group. And that's what diversity inclusion is trying to make you aware of, is that just bringing this, your friends and different people to a group doesn't mean that you're equal and you're bringing equality as well as equity. You have to include the guy to be part of the party. And that is something that I learned in the last talk with Dr. Richard Schulich, who brought this term. If you want to include people, you have to bring them to the party and give them a drink and start talking to the person. So just the invitation is not being not even equal or bringing equity and equality to your group. So things that you have to consider, I think. Equity goes beyond fair treatment, opportunity and access to information and resources. We should intentionally, this has to be with intention, and actively you have to remove barriers, challenges, and you have to also challenge discrimination and bias, and be active to ascertain. You will make your this like an institution, something that can be challenged but also can be fair and bring equality. So what is inclusion? Inclusion actively invites all to contribute and participate. The little guy that is part of the group. In the face of exclusive differential power, so there's different groups, different interests, but you're trying to, no matter what, whatever the policies and procedures, you are bringing this equity and equality. The distinctions between equal employment opportunity, affirmative action, and diversity and inclusion, if you see, one is the law, the other is process and policies, and the last one is more unethical and also cultural and social issue. So for the equal employment opportunities, the enforcement of statutes to prevent employment discrimination, that's federal law. Affirmative action is the effort to achieve parity in the workforce through outreach and eliminating barriers in hiring. That's one thing you have to consider. Could be school or jobs. Diversity inclusion, it's the leveraging differences in the workforce to achieve better results. Why the urologists, and for the, this is important for the urology in academics or in private practice? Well, because a lot of transformations are occurring nowadays. in 2022, we can see that we're questioning some important questions. For example, why the urologists are usually men, and how long we're going to have this kind of trend. Actually, this is changing as we speak. One of the surveys about specialties and the gender that is more present and linked in our medical society is that the OBGYNs overwhelmingly, they're the winners, but then where are we? We're one of the last, or if not the last, specialty that have only 8% of our females, of our urologists are female urologists. And here we have one of the articles that at least I think that I'm somehow linked to the history of the Brazilian urology. We have here the first author, Dr. Bicudo, is here in the audience from Brazil, and she wrote after a survey of the urologists in Brazil. She reported that definitely the female urologists, there used to be 2 several decades ago. Nowadays we have over 150 female or women in urology nowadays, but they cannot really find a good pathway and mentorship to other subspecialties other than general urology, or sometimes just taking care of UTIs. And this is something that we really have to think about a business. And if you see our industry, you can learn from also the business models that the research shows that definitely the diversity inclusion is a very positive effect that has on the workforce, racial diversity, and the gender diversity. They'll increase the performance, and it will also bring some kind of balance into that kind of business or institution that you have this important issue always enhancing performance. So again, we go back to what culture is. It's when you really start understanding how certain words or actions can really make you be more effective with the person you're communicating or less. And this is, if you see how they define about this, all the dimensions of the diversity and inclusion, is that there are always the underlying assumptions that you don't see. It's under the surface, it's really deep inside. And then you create from all those assumptions the culture, and you form you as a person, and understanding that when you see something, that's when the artifacts take a really important, it's an important factor when you start talking about diversity and inclusion, because as soon as you see somebody, how they dress, how they behave, the words that they pick to communicate with you, and the way that they speak, all those things are basically emerging. The artifacts are emerging from the deep inside assumptions that become values. The other important thing is with COVID, what we try to do is when you see diversity and inclusion, and we in academics, some of us, I work with 2 other co-authors, but we had the question in the beginning of the COVID, how can we check if any culture or different customs can really affect in case of pandemia. And what we use our personal contacts and communication, and using social media, are able to communicate with all these countries from Italy, Spain, South Korea, within the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Brazil. What we learn is that when in March of 2020, we started to see COVID really going everywhere, and we're seeing a lot of deaths and a lot of people infected. But when we communicate with international urologists, what we found was that it's incredible how the customs of the gathering, family gatherings, and friends, and when we talked to the Italian friends, they were really it was interesting because there were several peaks of the pandemic, and they still gather somehow if you talk to them, to social gatherings and so on, until we really reach a point that there was a need for government mandates and so on. So definitely culture and customs are very important, and how they affect different diseases. So in the business and economics, if you want to put a value of how this discrimination, the diversity inclusion is important, if you have problems with DI, discrimination, poor diversity, you will see that the equal opportunity, employment opportunity lawsuits and complaints can cost approximately $250,000 per complaint. And there is something called in business attrition rate, or churn rate, is the rate of employees that left the workforce because of DI issues. And that means that about 24 or 40% of the cases, you can decrease the productivity from 5 to 20% in whatever business you are. And this is in old data. This is not a new data in business. And that's why if you see what happened when you had a culture clash and having issues with DI is like we learned with the NASA, with the Challenger. When NASA, there was an organization that everybody respects, and but we had this terrible accident, and it was because of organizational performance issues that you saw with not only the diversity inclusion, I'm talking about not race or ethnicity or religion or anything like that. It's basically just different cultures of engineers and other people involved with this project that created problems. So you go from toleration, you tolerate, to acceptance, and to really value and celebrate diversity and inclusion. So it's important to endure, and you know, what is the definition to tolerate in this process? Is to endure or put up with someone's differences, and then you tend to accept and value. So the question is, ask yourself where you are in this process. But the most important thing for us as urologists and the forefront of medicine is to take care of our patients, community, and make sure you celebrate DI and equity and equality. Thank you very much.